So this session is about EDI, and we have a number of speakers lined up. The program has changed somewhat, so we will have 3 speakers now, one after the other. And then we'll have a 30-minute coffee break, and then we have another 2 speakers. And then the end of the session, we will turn into a panel discussion. So I would like to ask everyone to keep your questions until the end of the session. Meanwhile, I'm just checking with the speakers that are already online. Are you all fine to stay until the end of the session, like until noon, to take questions? Because if you are not available that long, we'll shift the questions a little bit earlier. Speak now or hold your tongue forever. Okay, seems that everybody is okay with this. I mean, should this still change, let us know. Yeah, I see in the chat also that people are confirming they can stay. So thank you for that. Thank you for the flexibility. So with that, I'd like to introduce the first speaker. This is Melissa van Dam of the International Center for Radio Astronomy Research. She is, I'm very, very jealous of your title. She is a galactic guide. Which means that she's the coordinator for SPIRIT, a set of robotic telescopes, and she's joining us today from Perth in Western Australia. So Melissa, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, I'm Melissa van Dam and this is my co-worker Gregory Robotham, and he's the coordinator for education and outreach at ICRA as well. So we're both members of the outreach team. And we also have a co-worker, Cass Rolls, who helped us with this talk but isn't able to be here today. So I'm going to share my screen so that I can share my presentation. So hopefully you can all see that. Hopefully that's working well. So we're talking about plugging the leaky pipeline and getting women into STEM from an outreach point of view, and what we can do as science communicators and educators to help bring girls, women, non-binary people into STEM. So we're going to talk about research of women in STEM, what we mean when we're talking about the leaky pipeline, what we have done here at ICRA, and what we think are important things to consider if you're running an event for girls and women. We're obviously not experts, but we're just sharing our experience and what we found through the research. So this is what we're already doing. We run a STEM camp called Stargirls in January, which is open to high school age girls and non-binary people. And that's an opportunity for them to meet a lot of women, particularly in astronomy, but definitely in STEM careers at different points of their careers, and practice STEM themselves. We also offer mentorship program, work experience, summer studentships. I'm just going to go through this quickly. ICRA has Pleiades Awards, and we also do sidewalk astronomy, and we're really careful with our online media and live event representation and what that looks like in terms of gender. All right, so let's move on to the research, which is a bit more interesting to everyone here. So when we're talking about the leaky pipeline, it's quite a common term that's used these days, but it's essentially saying that as career progression goes on, as we head into STEM and more into leadership level, more and more women are leaving their careers. And so when you're at a leadership level, we see that women are really underrepresented compared to perhaps down the schooling end, although they're still underrepresented there. So this is a diagram of the leaky pipeline, and it has some barriers which we'll talk about more shortly. I just want to show you some statistics. They are pretty Australian based, but there's also some more international ones in there. So in Australia, for example, it's pretty much 50-50 men and women in the workplace. But when it comes to the STEM skilled workforce, only 16% are women, which obviously doesn't match the gender balance that's actually in the workforce. And this goes back as far as selecting subjects. So around year 10 is when students make their decisions on what they're going to do in year 11 and 12 and look towards university. And as you can see, STEM subjects, particularly in engineering, are very heavily enrolled in by males, not so much by females. Biology or the more humanitarian sciences tend to have pretty equal representation down this end when we're talking about schooling and university. And then as the pipeline goes, those humanitarian sciences also see that inequality between men and women. And that continues on in university. This diagram shows what it's like in the United Kingdom. And as you can see, very similar. By far, a lot more males enroll in STEM subjects as opposed to females. And this is showing further on down the pipeline in leadership, in management positions, women only make up 28% in management positions and 8% in CEO positions or head of the business in STEM. And around the world, UNESCO has reported that only 30% of researchers and up are women. So that's obviously not representative of what the actual gender balance is. All right, so I wanted to talk about some barriers that women tend to face when being interested in STEM. So for most areas of STEM, attraction is a big issue, except for those humanitarian sciences that we're talking about before, biology and human biology. They often have an equal or higher women to men ratio. But then when it comes to retention in careers and progressing of careers, there's a definite barrier for women because they're not being retained and they're not progressing to those leadership levels. Intersectionality is also a big barrier for women. So if they are also low socioeconomic or they come from different backgrounds and cultures and races, particularly in Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women are very underrepresented in STEM. They experience that intersectionality as a barrier. So they've got many things working against them. When we did our own survey, so when we did our Star Girls, we had a wonderful bunch of girls and non-binary people who were aged between 14 and 18. Probably the oldest was almost 18, so around 17. So this is what these girls said themselves. They're not sure, but there's definitely a gap for opportunities and pay between boys and girls. Some challenges I fear I might face is that I might not be knowledgeable enough or that I might face challenges such as sexism. I feel that I'll face challenges such as not knowing what STEM career to pursue and feel out of place due to lack of females in STEM careers. So this is from these young girls themselves. They already see that there's no role models for them. They're not sure what it might look like. There was a lot of not feeling clever enough, a lot of that imposter syndrome, which is something that has been identified by the STEM Decadal Plan in Australia. There's 23 barriers that they identified, but as communicators, I think the ones that we can most work on are the lack of role models and mentors, imposter syndrome, so feeling like you're not good enough, you're not clever enough, and lack of understanding of career options. So what does a job in STEM actually look like? What's the day-to-day? Is it just going to university and becoming a professor, or what other things could you do in your day-to-day life? Over to you, Greg.
Excellent. Cool. Yeah. So as part of when we first wrote this talk, I decided to do some research, or we decided,
Yes.
I decided, and it's one of the things I found which is really interesting. There was an idea amongst teachers, Melissa and I both having a teaching background, that in Australia especially, if you came from a single-sex school and you were a female non-binary student, that was much better, that you would do better, and that if you were a young man in a single-sex school, you wouldn't do just as well. Oh, sorry, you do as well. Sorry, wait. If you if you went to a co-ed school, that you would do better in that place. And this has been many, many years, and I always thought that, and many teachers have said this to me over the years, even quite recently.
Yes.
But what does the research say? And we won't go through all this here, but what's really interesting is that the data doesn't seem, this is like long-term 20-year data, doesn't seem to back this up, which is really surprising to me, very, very surprising indeed. And really it came down to that, as I said, over a small section of the literature, basically most of it focuses on young males. It actually shows that there's no evidence that single-sex schools actually lead to better outcomes in the STEM careers for women and non-binary people compared to males. What it did show that a single-sex schools for any gender is actually normally a richer school. In Australia, you don't get single-sex public schools or government-run schools, and so it showed that, strangely enough, it's the money that makes it more likely for you to go into a more support to go into, for a young lady to go into a STEM career, because they have the background that can actually get people, forcing them or pushing them in the right, not forcing them, but pushing them in the right direction. It made sense when we looked into it, but it was a bit of a shock originally, because it's definitely an idea of single-sex schools were the way to get young women into these things. All right, and so the 20-year scoping reviews and other ones as well. I won't go through all these. All these notes are on the slides, obviously, and we can give those out. And we have a reference list at the end because we're big nerds, and we do love this sort of stuff. Oh yes, I think the one that is very interesting, the last point I will talk a bit more about, single-sex education does have the potential to enable the challenging or disrupting of some gender norms. So we are talking here about opportunities, and it does give, it did show that in a psychology side of things, to have students in a single sex can be useful because you're only working on with one gender, and therefore you can focus on that one gender, whatever that gender is. And we're talking about young women in STEM here, so it's going to be young women in this case. So that also made sense, and the data does back that up. So we're only talking about getting into STEM careers, not talking about quality of life, or it's a very large area of a young person in the world. So it's not saying single-sex schools have no impact. We're saying to get into a STEM career. Yes, there you go. All right. This was the one that this is actually the really interesting part. So a teacher in a single-sex school is going to have more resources and be better trained and more supported to support the students they work with. So that's why they can actually give their students a better education. But that comes down to resources. That doesn't come down to sectioning off a lot of young ladies in one area, sectioning off a lot of young men in another area. That doesn't seem to back up the what the data is saying at all, which is actually very surprising. Strange enough, money fixes all problems. If you had a lot of money given to a co-ed school and you were told to work on equity and pushing everyone to STEM, it would also do very well, and does seem to back that up.
Yes.
I'm going to keep harping on cash here, but that seems to be the answer in like many things in life. All right. So gendered events. This is something that we worked on with Stargirl STEM Camp. Yeah. And what does the research say about that? And have we been, as Eliza, have we been wasting our time? And it was a bit disturbing to begin with, because we're both like, oh no, we discovered that. No, once again, single gendered camps or events don't seem to actually increase the amount of people interested in STEM or going into STEM. It doesn't seem to work that way, but it does say that as well, STEM efficacy and STEM identity were maintained for both courses, but the programs, it says in yellow, the program should focus on developing stronger STEM efficacy within participants. And that's easier, once again, if you only have the needs of one gender or one group of students that you're trying to work on, even not in a gendered way. If you're only working with, let's say, Indigenous Australian students, then you can focus more on the needs of those students. Once again, if you can make if you make the number of variables smaller, then you can actually deal with it much easier, which, as with our science backgrounds, I'm sure we can understand that actually does make a lot of sense. So I guess, have we been wasting our time? No, luckily, but it was because we had a smaller group of people that we were able to focus on and deliver what we needed to deliver for them, to give them the education they required.
As science educators, we have a limited amount of time with the people that participate in our programs, and we want those to be as high impact as possible. So we found that working with the smaller, around 25 group of students allowed us to get to know these students, use strategies and activities that would focus on building their self-efficacy the most. And so we still feel that running gendered events is a way to increase that impact for us. And obviously that will be different for every organisation. So these are some things that we think are important to consider. I know that we only have a couple of minutes left. If you are considering planning a gendered event, one would be having role models. Do you have the majority of women presenting? Are there also men involved? Obviously, gender equity is the problem for both genders. So it is important to have men involved as well. And are your role models at different career stages? You want people that are early in their career and later in their career, so that we can show that career progression and really work on fixing the leaky pipeline.
With the role model side of things as well, the way we like to do it now, we try not to make a point of it. So if we happen to have 6 women and 2 men on a panel, we don't go, look at our 6 women and 2 men. We just do it, you normalize it. So, and in the end, it just goes, well, because it was said, I can't remember who said this, but it was a very famous point about, you don't point out how many men are on a panel ever. Exactly. You don't go, look, there's 7 dudes and 1 lady. We don't do that. So we don't do it for women at ICRA as well, because we're trying to normalize the fact that you can just have multiple women or majority of women, and it's not considered odd.
Yeah. And are they able to share their authentic voice? It's important that we are acknowledging that there are barriers for women and other people who experience that, especially the intersectional barriers. It doesn't help anyone to pretend that they're not there. So are they able to be authentic about barriers that they did face, and what can we do about that? Timing and accessibility of your event is something that you could consider depending on the group that you're trying to get. So we predominantly work with high school age students. So we're going to choose times that are outside of school, either in school holidays or after school. But that obviously depends on your demographic. If you're trying to get working mums or women with young children, you might want to do it during school hours. That depends on your demographic. And is your venue accessible for your demographic? Obviously to do with any disabilities that may be there, and also to do with things like parking, strollers, all those things that suit your demographic. Advertising, are women centered in your advertising, and where will you advertise to reach your demographic? So if you're trying to reach school students, you're probably going to go to their teachers and use that mentor to access them. And is your language inclusive? Are you trying to also target non-binary people or people who just don't identify as men? Another thing that I think is very important is to give your participants the next step. You don't want them to just come and see you for a couple of hours or a few days and then that's it, stop there. Give them something that they can work on next. For example, if you have any other events, or you could set them up with a mentor, just so that you can keep them within your organisation, you can keep that relationship going and you can keep them on that STEM path. And also partnering with other organisations is also very helpful. I can see that we are over 15 minutes now, so we'll probably stop there. But if you have any questions, we will try and hang around for the Q&A later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Melissa and Greg, for that very interesting presentation. Yeah, as we said, we're going to keep the questions for the panel session later. I received some interesting ones already. So yeah, the next speaker is Marcos Villaverde, and he is a project assistant and communication specialist in the coordination office of the Spanish participation to the Square Kilometer Array. So Marcos, I'm going to give you the floor here and move my stuff out.
Okay, good morning. I'm very happy to talk in this impressive room It's a bit scary. It's an important place. And I want to thank the organization to give me the opportunity to talk about this for astronomy project in which my institution, the Instituto Astrofísica of Andalucía, is involved. They are for project. There are a lot of people involved, but I put here some of people that help me to put together all these projects in the presentation. Okay, so this is the 4 projects I'm going to present. In general, they're focusing these 4 sustainable development goals in different ways. The first project is from the SKA to the wall, and is focused in breaking one of the barriers we found in communication, one of these frontiers, the language frontier. And this project is an international project. There are 7 countries involved in the project. It has a grant from the International Astronomical Union Office for Astronomy Outreach, and from the SKA Observatory, from the National Outreach Communication and the SCA Communication Network Funding Scheme. And the objective of the project is to promote radio astronomy and SKAO between the Spanish and Portuguese speaking countries. So you see here in the map, there is several countries speaking Spanish in red and Portuguese in green. There are around 700 million native speakers of these languages. So there is an important fraction of the global population. And because most of the information of the research infrastructure and in the scale is more or less the same, is mostly in English, because the headquarters are here and the telescopes are in Australia and South Africa. They are English speakers. The most of the communication is in English. So we lack that kind of information in other languages. So in a project, we are going to work in some products, communication products, in 3 languages: in Portuguese and Spanish and in English, but for subtitles. Okay. In the project, there are, as I said, there are 7 countries involved, and the objective is to get the information that we get from the telescopes, from the headquarters, all that kind of communication materials, and translate it to Spanish and Portuguese, but in an easy way to reach to the people and to reach to our target that are high school students between 15 and 18 years old. So we are going to do it through video, podcasts with interviews and images, animations, that kind of things. That thing is going, the part of the project that is going to do in Spain and Portugal, because in Spain and Portugal is partnered of the SKAO, has SKCOM members involved in the project, and this product, these videos, these podcasts will be shared with our American partners, and they, on their part, will do some workshops related with construction of antennas, small antennas, and we'll do some tutorial videos, some write some educational protocols that will share with us, and they will dedicate a special effort to reach to rural regions, especially in Mexico and Nicaragua. And well, all this knowledge and all this know-how will be shared through the astronomy platform AstroEdu platform, that will be a peer review, and I will serve with the rest of the world. Here you see some of the images of the things that we are trying to do, because this is an ongoing project. Not everything is ongoing, but this is the idea. One of the workshops is to build radio antennas, small radio antennas using these parabolic dishes, and just to detect the emission from the sun and the emission from satellites. There are other kind of antennas like this in the center that use this amplifier that are connected to the computer and can generate data and graphics like this that can be helpful to detect the solar activity. And we already made some videos. We are editing them with interview to researchers involved in the SKAO, talking about radio astronomy, basic concepts of radio astronomy, and about the SKAO observatory and telescopes. Okay. The second project is Education for All. It's focused in breaking the socioeconomic barrier, but in a very special place. So, because in this project, there are 3 countries involved: Burkina Faso, France, Spain, and the project will be done in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso has a huge problem with terrorist attacks. You see here in this map the number of terrorist attacks, especially in the north and in the east. This produce internal displacements, and there are a lot of people that leave their homes and now live in refugee camps. And these attacks are sadly very frequent and very violent, and the education also suffer from this, because the schools are one of the objectives of these terrorist attacks, and it affects directly to the education of the young people. And as they lose their schools, they suffer a trauma from this attack. They lose their interest in to learn, and they are more easily can be easily recruited by these terrorist groups, right, to be soldier children. So in 2021, my colleague Camille Sorgo and some other researchers that works in France and in Burkina proposed to the IAU Office for Astronomy for Development a project to promote education in these internal displaced camps, just to alleviate the trauma associated with these attacks and with the displacements, and to stimulate the will to learn between the children, between the kids, and to attend the school, and spread this what we call the pale blue dot spirit. Is the that spirit that we are all in the same wall and we have to cooperate. Okay, so this is going to be done by some hands-on workshops and stargazing sessions there in the refugee camps in Burkina Faso. The workshop are going to be 3 days long in 3 different camps, around 300 children in total, and it's also multilingual in French and some language from Burkina. And we will focus in young girls. We will do the activity if there is a minimum ratio of 50% girls. And we will some prices and of course a promotional video to tell this story. This is an ongoing project. It's in preparatory phase. Now we are in this phase. In the second visit to the camps, just to find volunteers and to give them some formation for these activities. And we expect that at the end of the year we can do the activities on the camp. So these are some photos. Some of the material that we need for the project are already there. Some telescopes that came from Bredul as part of the France collaboration, and some books. So, and well, there is a step place to contribute, to collaborate. So if you want to participate in this, please contact Amidou Sorgo. Here's his email. The third project is inclusive visit to Calar Alto Observatory that aims to break the frontier of disabilities and the problem that people with disabilities have to reach the places where the science is done. So Calar Alto Observatory is an optical observatory. There are five optical telescope. The largest has a mirror of 3.5 meters, so it's a good telescope. Is at the southeast of Spain in the Almeria province, and they already have a program for visitors. They do visits to the telescopes, stargazing activities, and with this project that is inside the more larger project that is called Astronomía Accesible. This PI, the PI is Enrique Pérez Montero. In this project, we get groups of people with visual or mentally disabilities to this observatory to do a visit. I want to stress that this is nothing. This is a thing that we should do in the research infrastructure, because if you read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it is clear that everyone has the right to share in scientific advancement, advancement and its benefits. And this is a way to involve people and to tell people what are we doing in that research infrastructure, and at the end, in which things are we spending their taxes. So I think it's important also to reach to that part of the community. So what we do in these activities, we receive them at the observatory. We give them a talk with material adapted to the disability, but we found that this material is also used by people without disabilities and gives them more intense experience in the visit, through the visit. So it's a totally inclusive project in the sense that the same material that used for people with disabilities can be used for anyone and will improve the experience. So we give the talk and then we visit the telescopes. With some groups we can visit 2 telescopes, with others we only can visit the larger one, this one that is the 3.5 meters. This is an example of the material that we use. These are some sheets with writing in Braille, and you can touch and know that the different parts. In this example here is representing the view that you have from the visitor center of the different domes of the observatory, and we have also other sheets here for the internal structure of the largest dome or for the map of the observatory. And one thing that we do with the visual impaired people, and maybe at some point can be done with everyone, is to allow them to touch everything that they can touch, that are not critical. Okay, we have some models of the telescopes so they can touch and have an idea of what is how is the size and the form of the buildings. They can touch some telescopes that we have there for outreach purposes, but they also can touch the telescopes or the scientific instruments. Okay, and of course we have some specific material to be touched for them and to understand an object, the sky, the moon. Okay? Of course, we cannot do this with every group. Just imagine a group of children touching 1 million scientific instruments. It can be hard. Other thing that we do in this visit is to make noise, because sounds are very useful to the people to get involved or to get a more intense experience there. And here's an example. I don't know, you don't have the sound, but here in this telescope dome, we are opening the slit of the telescope, and this make a lot of noise, and the people that cannot see hear this, and you explain what is happening, and as you will see, okay, the people will understand. It's very happy. Okay, there. And we also use audio descriptions and sonifications of scientific data. Sorry. Here you have some example. They are in Spanish. El universo en palabras, the universe in words. You can look them in the YouTube channel of the IAA, and you will see how an astronomical object can be described for visually impaired people. In this project, we also receive from the visits groups of people with intellectual disabilities, and well, some tips for this kind of groups. You have to select the main topics, the main concept that you want to communicate. You don't have to, you cannot give them a lot of concept, a lot of idea. Just select 2 or 3 maybe, and you have to repeat the concept, but in different ways. In that sense, all this material that we have designed for the visual impaired people is useful, because touch is another way to learn, and well, if you repeat the same message but in different ways, finally they learn something. Of course, you have to use easy language. You can use, of course, techniques, but there are some words that maybe we use in our daily language that are not useful for this group, and we have to try to make the language as easy, as simple as possible to be understood by them, and put then examples and things to have into account with these groups is the movement limitations and the wheelchair size. I say this because we have a problem with one group that they have a special wheelchair, and the wheelchair doesn't fit inside the elevator of the building, because okay, these buildings are research infrastructure, are not thinking for visitors, are not thinking for people with wheelchairs. So having to account these small details and contact the people of the group for these details to be sure that everything is going to be okay. And then the last project is the open site initiative that we are doing at the Spanish prototype of the SKR Regional Center. Let me explain for those of you that maybe don't know what is open science. Open science is the way, a new way, or the way that we should do research, science, sharing the data, sharing the process, the lab notes, in order that all this research can be reused, redistributed, and can be reproducible, because one key thing in science is that the experiments has to be reproducible to demonstrate that one thing is true, or the results of that experiment. And open science is key for let this knowledge, the scientific knowledge, to reach everyone, and is recognized by the UNESCO like as a tool for achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and also is recognized by the SKO like a pillar of the observatory, because the open science is rooted in SKA foundational principles. Okay. So how can open science help to the Sustainable Development Goals? Okay, you have here some examples. Can help to the quality education for the partnership of goals, because you share the information, you share the methods. Okay, and you can create more collaborators and reach more people, and also helps to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion, because open science helps to visualize visualize the work of all the people involved in the project, and to emphasize the paper that, for example, women or people from other regions of the world plays in that experiment. And this open science in SKO will be done in the SCAR regional centers that are data and computing facility that will store the data from the telescopes, and will offer services to the scientific community to work with that data, to analyze that data. And also these regional centers can be used for breaking the barrier that people from different parts of the world has to when they want to reach the research infrastructures. Thanks to open science that offers cold storage and computing, archive service, following the FAIR principles, data have to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reproducible. Offer collaborative tools, and you can do, because you can do training. And in fact, in the Spanish prototype, we are doing training in radio astronomy and software, and in open science methodology. And you can use that open data also with virtual reality tools to offer the scientists and the general public a new way to see that scientific information in an attractive way, in a different way, that it can offer new angles to the data, or a very attractive way to see the information we have with the telescopes. And also, thanks to open science, we can do citizen science. So to end with this for project, the general point of this for project is that we have several ways to break these walls, to break the barriers we found. And just I want to encourage you to involve in some of these different ways. And so thank you. And if you want to contact me, you have my email and my Twitter account. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcus. I thought that was pretty interesting, and it, at least with me, it generated some questions. We also got some nice questions in from the Slack channel. Looking at the time, Actually, I think I'm going to take an executive decision and say that we're going to break now. Look at Mathieu, 30 minutes is still okay? Okay, so let's try to reconvene at 10:25 so that everybody has time to sit down and the speakers have time to line up, and then we'll continue the session with presentation by Anna. So take your breaks and see you in 30 minutes. We're going to start the next session. I see that the next presenter is already online. Hi, Anna.
Hello.
So Anna is joining us from, hold on, I have my computer is malfunctioning, of course. The moment I need to say something, that's cool, carry on.
Okay.
So we have Ana Belén Martinez from Alba Synchrotron joining us. Anna, I'm going to give the floor to you instead of taking your time by saying random things. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you see properly my slides?
Yes, works perfectly.
Great. Thank you very much, and hello everyone. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Ana Belén Martinez, and I'm working at the Alba Synchrotron facility next to Barcelona. First of all, let me say that I would have loved to be there. In fact, I was supposed to be there, but yesterday my flight was affected by one of the Ryanair strikes here in Spain, so unfortunately I need to stay. Before introducing the project that I will talk about, which is called Ciencia en Colores, something that could be translated like science in colors or color science, let me briefly describe the facility where I work and then arrive to why we are organizing a project like this one. The Alba Synchrotron is the national light source in Spain, is the only synchrotron radiation facility aimed at producing synchrotron light. So we offer our instruments or different laboratories and beamlines to the scientific community. In fact, up to now, we have 10 operational beamlines and 4 more that are being constructed. And many different scientists are coming to our facilities every week to perform experiments in a wide variety of fields, from chemistry, material science, physics, environmental issues, but also cultural heritage experiments, for example. And we are also including new analytical tools in our facility. In fact, we have just opened an electron microscopy center with 2 microscopes, and a third one is coming in the following months. And as our facility is been operating for 10 years now, we are also designing or upgrade in the near future. So in less than a decade, our facility will be totally renewed, and we could keep offering our analytical tools for the community. Our users are mainly coming from Spain. We receive on average about 2,000 users per year, and they are coming from public institutions such as universities, research centers, and so on. But we do also receive in a smaller percentage private companies that use our tools to analyze the properties of matters in these varied scientific topics that I mentioned before. The communications and outreach activities at ALBA started in 2013, so almost a decade also of activities, and we have performed several activities. We are a small group, but we have done common, let's say, public engagement activities such as guided tours, open days. We still do them, and we also work on science stories and news. We prepare videos from time to time. We released this year a new podcast to explain what we do and the impact of our facility. So why a project like Ciencia en Colores? No, why do we need to start this type of project? I believe that this may answer the question, and this slide show us, and we have seen all along these years, that when receiving groups, especially with teenagers, we realize that a part of them are really keen on the things that we are explaining. They really believe on that, and they think on science as a future for them, but not all of them A part of them, they don't really care. They come because it's something compulsory, and they come with their classmates and teacher. And we have forgotten them since the very beginning. So we thought, what can we do to find a project to appeal them, no? To try to find something interesting for them. And what we found was creating Ciencia en Colores, and this project tries to talk about social aspects of science. Instead of transmitting knowledge, scientific inputs, how a particle accelerator works, which type of experiments that we perform, we do so, but we are focused more on the people doing that. The main goals of the projects are three. The first one is we try to raise awareness on teenagers, high school students, about the need for a diverse science. And we try to show them that if science is not diverse, our society will lose a lot. The second goal is that we want to show them that all type of people are welcome in science. I mean, when we are receiving those groups, some of them believe that only very smart people, very talented people can be coming working here, and that's not true. We need to transmit them that there is a space for all of them if they really want to pursue a scientific career. And finally, for those who have already chosen that science is not their future, or they believe that this is not for them, we want to transmit them that science affects all of us because it shapes our society, it affects our well-being and many other things. So it's good for you to know how science works and which are the principles of science to be able to have a critical way of thinking and to fight pseudoscience and specific ways of fake news. So the project has been organized in this way. We focus the project on high school students, specifically those from 12 to 14 years old, and these are the first years of high school here at Spain. And what we offer the teachers were given to workshops of 1 hour at the classrooms. So we were bringing 3 different people from our facility to the classrooms. One of them was a scientist or an engineer. The second one was an external educator who was dynamizing the session and taking care that we were covering all the topics that we wanted to talk about. And the third one was a person from the communications and outreach office to coordinate the whole session. The contents of the 2 workshops follow this different list of topics. At the very beginning, we were introducing very briefly our facility, what we do, but specifically, we were putting the emphasis on the person, the scientist or the engineer, his or her background, how she or he arrived at ALBA, what things are interesting for he or for her, and so on. After that, we did a second exercise trying to make students think about the different kind of professions that are in a facility like ours. So we were asking them what type of professions can you find at ALBA? And obviously, they always think on scientists or engineers, but they did not take into account very important services such as cleaning services, legal advice, or other administrative aspects. And the third exercise that we were performing with them in this first workshop was about identity. They need to identify and classify themselves, let's say, try to make this exercise about different identity aspects such as gender, social class, ethnicity, or even so sexual orientation. In the end, what we wanted them to do or to think about is if there are some prejudices still today that linked identity and careers. As an example, we were asking them, when you imagine, for instance, a young Latin American woman, what kind of profession do you think she's doing at ALBA? And many of them could say that cleaning services or cooking or things like that. But what we wanted to show is that there are also scientific and engineer profiles with these trends. And one of the persons participating in this workshop was a young Latin American woman who works for the radio protection service of our facility, for instance. This is just an example. The second workshop was 1 week later. So we came back to the same classroom with the same people at the school. And the perspective was a bit different. Here we try to analyze 4 different stories in smaller groups and from different perspectives, and try to identify if there were some associated bias. Those stories, some of them were more famous, like, for example, we talk about James Cook's discoveries and the possible implications for locals in their territories. We also talk about Dorothy Vaughan, who was well known for some of them because of the recent movie Hidden Figures, and we took the opportunity to talk about the extra sacrifice that this group of Afro-American ladies, mathematicians, need to face to be able to work in this field. But we will also talking about 2 more stories, maybe not so common for everybody, like, for example, problems with medical diagnosis for women, and especially this case of Paula Upshaw was quite evident because this woman was infradiagnosed of a massive heart attack, because at that moment women were not supposed to have, young women were not supposed to have massive heart attacks. And finally, the 4th story was about the impact of artificial intelligence in law systems in the United States, and how this guy, Paul Zilli, who was highly rated with an artificial intelligence system in the state, was penalized because of that system, no? Because and that system also presents some bias associated to race, no? In fact, it has been proved that it highly rates Black people rather than white people. So in the end, in both of the sessions, but specifically in this second one, we tried to make them think if we are still today responsible of this bias, and if we as a society can fight it, no, can find new ways to avoid it in the future. So the first results of this project appear, and we did 20 workshops in total, so 10 double workshops. That was done in 6 different high schools in Barcelona. We tried to choose, we only offered those 10 double workshops as a pilot project, just to check how it worked. And we chose public schools rather than private schools. And we also took into account if those schools were what is called here high complexity schools. Because most of them have a wide variety of ethnicities and a wide variety of students, and also more diversity. And the lessons learned after this first project is that we did an internal and external evaluation, internal with our people or volunteers who were attending the schools, and the external with teachers and students. And we reached the conclusion that we need to perform a second edition this year. We will come back again. We will be offering the workshops. We will probably need to give further testimonials to show as much diversity as possible. Up to now, in this first pilot, we were just bringing 1 person. We are thinking about finding new ways to show more people involved in science by using videos, or we'll see. We also found out that this type of projects are much better to be worked with smaller groups. In the second workshop, when we were analyzing the 4 stories, we were dividing the class in 4, And that was wonderful because that was a group of 7, 8 students, and then you realize that the students feel much more comfortable to talk, to express their opinions. And we finally have decided to focus the project on the first years of high school, because we believe that we could have more impact as they are still deciding what to do in the future. And finally, we need to push for more active involvement from the students. We need to find kind of final product or something, I don't know, activity to share what they have learned and what they have found out along all these activities. And that's all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be happy to answer later on.
Thank you, Anna. I thought that was pretty interesting. And again, we'll take some questions later for a panel discussion. I think it links pretty well with some of the other speakers. So now I would like to invite Ines Crespo to come here and present her views on DEI and her work. I actually have to say I have heard her work presented a couple of times, but I enjoy it each time. So
sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. So my name is Ines. I'm Research Communications Officer at the Roslin Institute, which is part of the University of Edinburgh. And so today I'll give an overview of our communications activities related to equality, diversity, and inclusion. It will focus mainly on digital communications. So my public engagement colleagues also do amazing work in that area. I'll mention a few examples. And I will go first talk about internal communications and campaigns we do, and then external communications and mention a few lessons learned along the way. So before I start, just to tell you a little bit about the Roslin Institute. So it's famous for being the birthplace of the leadership, but we don't do any cloning anymore, and now we focus on world-leading animal research. The Institute has been a member of the Athena Swan Charter since, well, for 10 years now, and we are a proud holder of a gold award. So that's a framework mainly in the UK, but I know in other countries, for instance, in Australia, this is also being used to help promote equality, diversity, inclusion in science and higher education. And a point I want to make here, so because the Institute has done lots of different efforts and initiatives to promote this and give everyone the same opportunities, regardless of their gender or background. So it's really not about positive discrimination. It's not about choosing people from a certain gender or a certain background and give them preference, but really trying to eliminate barriers that exist and prevent them from progressing and having a thriving career. Before I start, so if everyone ever tells you that there is no issue of gender equality, or maybe you think that yourselves and there's nothing we need to fix. So my colleagues run a science outreach center at work, and so they have people coming in like from schools, conduct experiments for a whole day. They meet some of our scientists and they conduct experiments and analyze the data with them. And a few years ago, one of the pupils wrote this letter to my colleagues after visiting, and she said, I learned that you do not have to be a boy to be a scientist. And this is really living proof that there's so much work to do there. So what do we do in terms of internal communications? Our internal communication campaigns related to these issues are really made to raise awareness about these issues, not just issues, but also different groups. They provide educational resources for our staff. So for those who want to educate themselves more about, because I think there's so much to learn, and you know, there are so many minority groups or underrepresented groups that is important to understand. but we're also mindful of making information accessible. So, and we're still learning, and we really receive feedback, sometimes complaints, and we learn from those. So for instance, we try not to use italics because that's harder to reach. For links, hyperlinks, we actually describe where the information can be found rather than using URLs, because it can be harder for some people to reach. And we use this, so we have a campus bulletin every week going out, and we use that to promote some of our messages. We also, the Institute has its own internal newsletter that goes out every couple of months. So we try to do that, and it's really about putting together a lot of the information and resources available and promote it to staff. It's also very useful to get staff and our colleagues involved in different campaigns. So if they wish to, so we collaborated, and I'm part of the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and also the Career Development Committee. And we work with them to make sure that the messages are combined. If there's a specific awareness day, for instance, that I'd like to celebrate, we try to think, oh, what can we do communications wise, and really join efforts there. So staff can be a voice to this. So in terms of external communications, so we really try to make a point in showing diversity in our communications. So for instance, we have an interview series called Meet Our Scientists, and we make an effort to interview as many men as women for that. And it's not that hard for us because we have more or less 50-50 in our institute. But really try to do that. It's actually one of the reasons we started this interview series a few years ago, was because we realized that people coming to us to issue press releases or communications about their papers were, always the same 10 people, and mainly male scientists. So we thought, well, surely all the other almost 500 scientists have something to tell to the world. So let's just go straight to them ourselves. And it's been really popular so far. We celebrate not just Women's Day, but also Men's Day. The men can have lots of mental health issues and don't speak about it. So his Instagram story is an example. So we didn't reach out to them specifically for this. This is actually material we collected unexpectedly from our interviews. So for instance, we interviewed one of our deputy directors for research, and he talked about being made redundant some years ago in another job. And I said, well, it's an amazing example. If people are struggling in their careers, this really goes to show that you can still achieve so much in your career, even if things go bad now. I think the world should know about this. As Anna actually mentioned as well in her presentation, is about showing people, and especially children, that science is for everyone. So on our open day, we have an activity with a map where we could show where our scientists are from, and people can see that they are from all over the world. We have a coloring book with some of our scientists, and so there are many activities related to that. And of course, we celebrate Awareness Day. So I mentioned Men's Day. And again, so for International Day of Women and Girls in Science this year, we again took some quotes that were relevant from the interviews for this day. And we thought, so because we have these quote cards that I asked one of our designers to create some time ago, and there's one that is quite more or less discrete, which is like some blue and red. And we've been using that in our communications. I was like, well, they created this orange one. Shall we use it for Women's Day? And I can't say that this is what did it, but the truth is that it got quite a lot of engagement. So I think going really for bold colors can help there. So having learned, well, we think we learned with that one, we try to use also a bold color for Women's Day the same year. And it's always very tricky because these 2 days are very close together. So we went for purple this time, and because it's actually the color of International Women's Day. And it worked less well, but it still worked very well. But this time we actually asked people. So we wanted to show, and as another speaker mentioned, the leaky pipeline. So we wanted to feature women who are professors. So we asked professors on our campus to contribute with code. So we used that. We also celebrate Pride Month. And here it's quite interesting to see, because we used this picture that we took just before the pandemic for Pride Month on Instagram, and it did quite well. So we are not that big on Instagram, so 39 likes, it is pretty good for us. Whereas on Facebook, engagement was a lot lower. I don't know, it's just this channel, but also because the cards are not as visual as a single picture. So that's something to learn there as well. So I mentioned the Science Outreach Center at the beginning, so we call it EPSOC, and my colleagues do an amazing work there. So gender equality is not their main goal, even though they received that letter from the girl, because there's already many women studying biology. But the top priority is really reaching out to schools from deprived areas and from areas where children are not so likely to go to a science museum, for instance, a science festival, or get involved with science in any way. So they really worked with teachers from those areas and tried to find funding as well to bring those schools in. And it's the children get so excited about the workshops when they come in, and they really start considering pursuing, well, maybe careers too soon to say, depending on their age, but they really, we really saw an impact there of them continuing studying science. They also collaborated with an autistic association for autistic girls. So they do really amazing work. I could just go on because I have so many different projects, but I will focus on the digital communication. This is our side of things. So in all our messages, we try them that they are consistent with our values, with the Institute values. So on our website, we make sure that people considering working with us, for instance, and also the ones who do work with us know about this, and we make sure that they know the resources available to them related to that. So for instance, on the right-hand side, you have some of the events that are organized at the Institute. And this is as the added bonus of being good for recruitment, because you're showing that you're a welcoming place to work. In terms of all of us want to have, and we had a presentation from SKO yesterday about this, we all want to have an amazingly looking website. So the University of Edinburgh, one of the top priorities is to make the website accessible. And sometimes can be a bit frustrating for us because we'd like this other feature that looks better, but it's really making so there's a quality assessment steps that we have to make sure we comply to. So for instance, you might be setting up a page and you have different sizes of headlines you can use, and you think, well, actually here it will look really good using this other font size, but because for people using screen readers, it makes it a lot easier for them to read it if you use the headlines in the right order. And so I learned some years ago in a workshop that about 10% of the population has some sort of visual impairment. So, it's not a small fraction. It's really important that you want your users, everyone looking at your website, to be able to read it well. And also my public engagement colleagues, they also consider this in their activity. So for instance, this was an activity, so we work with a lot of sheep. This is 2 different kinds of wool, so people could have visually impaired, people could have a visual tactile experience. So what worked and what didn't work? So featuring happy scientists works really well. And one thing we learned, so for instance, for our interviews, we ask scientists, could you please give us a few pictures of you? It can be at work, but also, doing any hobbies you might like doing outside work. And this really goes to show also, that the human side, if I dare say, of the scientist, but really showing people that everyone can be a scientist. and that works really well. So even on Canva, you now have, so this montage wasn't done on Canva, but now there are some templates you can use to have a few pictures together, and those still work really well. But anything with text that looks a little bit more constructed doesn't do so well in our case, and images, stock images, the same, so they didn't work so well. I mentioned the code card, so this is the one we usually use, and again, happy staff, members of staff. But this said, when our new director was appointed, there was a bug on the website, and the link didn't generate an image on Facebook, and we still had really high engagement. So if the content is good, people will like it. And this said, sometimes we use the code cards in very cool pictures and you still have low engagement. So as you all know, depending on what else is happening in the world and the time of day, etc., things can perform worse, and it's not always obvious why that is. Just before I finish, so one of the main messages related to equality, diversity, inclusion is that example needs to come from the top, and senior management really needs to be involved in implementing this, because we can all have great ideas on how to improve things, but we don't have the power to do them. So we really try to get senior management involved. So for instance, for Pride Month, we got a quote from our director, and it's as part of our Athena's One commitment, we go to conferences and events, and as Marjolaine mentioned, she heard, well, this talk, but also other talks from me about not just communications. So because we do aim to share expertise, and we all have a lot to learn, and I have learned so much this morning from other colleagues. So it's really important to do that. And so thank you for listening. This is actually the last week I'll have access to this amazing view, because I'm changing jobs on Monday. So I'll miss it very much, but thank you so much. And I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks a lot, Ines. As usual, I enjoyed listening to you. I think these kind of good and bad examples just need to be repeated, so that, I know that there's a bunch of people here today who are for the first time at Paris, so I'm sure it's a new message to some of you. Which brings me to the last speaker of this session, last but not least, Maria Lyubnova. I hope I pronounced that sort of correctly. She's joining us from the European Southern Observatory, and well, I'll just give you the floor without further ado, Maria. It's all yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen at the moment?
Yes, works perfectly.
Yes, so you see my starting slide, diversity and inclusion in the European Southern Observatory Science Communication Products. Well, thank you very much to the organizers for enabling me to talk today and to give you some insights about how we do make sure that the ISO science communication products are diversity aware and representative of our community. Before I start, I'll give you a brief introduction to the European Southern Observatory, because as not every one of our attendees might be aware, so ISO, for short, is an intergovernmental treaty organization founded in 1962. So this year we are celebrating our 60th anniversary, and we will be having a campaign later on in the year about that. ISO's mission is twofold. First and foremost, to build and operate world-class ground-based astronomical facilities. And second, but not less important than the first one, is to foster international collaboration in astronomy. ISO employs about 600 staff. We are located both in the headquarters in Garching and the various sites in Chile where our telescopes are. And so all this organization enables a lot of nice things to happen in the world of astronomy, mainly scientific discoveries and understanding of the universe. and the pushing the frontiers of technology and innovation, increasing scientific and technological excellence in general. But very important is the training of the next generations of astronomers and engineers. And this is something that ESO takes a lot care about through dedicated educational and outreach activities. Furthermore, we also act as players in international collaborations to ensure science policy for the advancement of fundamental research. Our telescopes, as I've mentioned, are situated in Chile. We operate there 3 observing sites. Paranal perhaps is the most famous one, which hosts the VLT and the VLTI, also a plethora of survey and smaller hosted telescopes. In the very close to that is Amazonas, so where the ESO's extremely large telescope is currently being under construction. I encourage you to visit our website elt.eso.org to see the webcams and how to monitor in live the progress of the construction. And within this decade, this joint Paranal Observatory will host also the CTA South telescope, and which we are looking forward to. The other 2 sites are La Silla, so this is our first site in Chile, located, inaugurated more than 50 years ago, where the first ESO telescopes were developed and a lot of key technologies tested. And also the last site is further north, so that's Chacmantor, the 5,000-meter high plateau in the Atacama Desert, where ALMA and APEX are located. ESO is supported by 16 member states at the moment, together with Australia as a strategic partner and Chile as our partner and host state for our observatories. And at the moment, ESO is serving a community of about 100,000 users worldwide through its various possibilities to access to the telescopes, either with direct observations or through data in the shared archive, which is accessible to all scientists worldwide. This number sounds quite big. There are not that many astronomers worldwide. However, we know that our archive users also are a lot of science communicators, a lot of science journalists. So various groups are using ESO data and for their research or their stories in case of science journalism. So that said, this brings me to the topic of today's talk about the ESO science communication products. How do we communicate the advances of ESO's community? So I will use it as an example, our public website, eso.org. So here you see a screenshot of as it is today. So we publish, we have various communication products, press releases, which are the most prominent. And then we have a lot of announcements and short stories. And we use the ESO blog to interview scientists to tell us either about their research or about some development of an instrumentation or a different activity that they're involved within ESO. So we also have a very rich video archive with video news. So almost every press release is accompanied by a video material. So here it's an overview of these materials divided by target audiences. So we serve various target groups: journalists, media, wider public, scientists, policymakers, and each of these groups has its own specifics, and each of these groups needs to be taken care of properly, also in terms of diversity and inclusion. At the end, this list is not exhaustive, so we also have other activities, for example, press conferences. Most of you have seen recently the EHT announcement of the result from the Milky Way, the first picture of the black hole shuttle in the Milky Way, which we did here in-house in Garking headquarters. And we do such press conferences about once in 2 years, more or less. We also have virtual guided tours and guided tours in person to our telescopes. And however, so all of these overarching principles of diversity and inclusion that I'll talk about are applicable to any of these activities. So how do we go for communications product? I will use as an example a press release selection, because any time when we receive a request about to communicate a story, irrespective whether it's a science result or it's a milestone for the organization or a technical achievement of a consortium member from the bigger ISO community, for example, instrumentation consortium, and so on, we treat them as in the beginning as a press release request, because press releases have the highest visibility for us, apart of press conferences, of course, but not each of these stories is most suited for a press release. As you saw, we have various channels, and we use this to reach our target audience in the most optimal way. So we do evaluate these requests based on their public interest and newsworthiness and scientific and ISO relevance, but we do not do a peer review of papers at this stage. So this is very important to stress. Requests are discussed by a team, the so-called news team, consisting of people with backgrounds in science communication, journalism, astronomy, including practicing astronomers, member of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee of ISO. This is myself at this stage. And we also consult with internal experts at ISO when we would need a second opinion on some of the points. And it is very, very important to stress that here we are not treating the community as, here we are not serving only the ISO internal community, these 700 people that have ISO affiliations, but we serve this 100K strong community out there, which is arguably much more diverse than what is the current ISO community in-house. So what I wanted to give you a specific example here, what we adopted to make sure that we observe diversity and inclusion in all our communications products in equalized manner, is that in 2019, the ISO Diversity and Inclusion Committee appointed a specific working group to discuss and issue guidelines on D&I for science communication products produced by our department. And so a major guideline there was that these products do not represent only the internal population, but the ISO community at large. We consider diversity, the dimensions of diversity of gender, age and seniority, and country affiliation, acknowledging that this is not the same as cultural background or nationality. This last point is quite difficult to track because of the expected mobility in researchers' research careers. And outcome of that process were 13 specific recommendations for diversity and inclusion, which are all stemming from the point that diversity is a value and strength of ISO's community. So this is one of the values of the organization itself. Yeah, so that these guidelines, they were adopted by the Director General, and they have been distributed broadly. And this is something that we in the Department of Communication are very careful in using whenever we craft a communications product. So here it's an example, how do we use this in practice? So of course, the most important point of increasing diversity is, of course, to have diverse team to ensure diverse outcomes. Here, this is not always possible because we do not engineer teams. We can't. We receive a request and we need to work with the team as it is. However, we explicitly encourage the team to bring up research, the diversity in their team. For example, when we send them a questionnaire to answer about their research in advance, we ask them these questions to be answered not only from the main lead author of the paper, for example, but also from various team members, so that in this way we can bring in diverse voices. And we are explicit that we would like to hear specifically from junior researchers in the team, as well as any underrepresented groups. A major caveat of this method is that we do not have access to demographics. This is due to GDPR mainly, so we're working on that. However, a way we can monitor the outcome is because we do request authors for authors of quotes in materials to provide us with their preferred pronouns. This is very important, not only in English, but much more in many of the languages in which these communications materials are translated. Certain languages are very gender specific, so this is very much needed. And it is in this way we can backwards monitor to have statistics of the outcome of this exercise. And so when interviewing, it is very important to broaden the pool of interviewees, and so this is something that actually we have found out that majority of teams are very happy to bring in the diversity of their teams. Just like Ines shared in the previous talk, typically the press release requests are coming from the same team with the same PIs which are experienced in the usage of the science communication as a tool for disseminating their results. However, the moment when we ask them, please bring in diverse voices, they're very happy and responsive, which tells me that our community at large is interested also. We're gradually moving away from times in which I am the PI and I have to be the only one mentioned in a communications product. What I really like working on is the last point here, dedicated campaigns. So this is something that we can commemorate specific days, for example, Women in STEM or Women's Day in general, or just to give a few examples. And for this, then we organize a series of interviews, for example, publishing a blog post, a series of social media interviews, which are distributed over our various accounts, depending on where the content is suitable, video interviews, or when we do virtual guided tours. So this can be also nice ways to issue topical tours targeted specifically for a certain career stage. An example is around the ISO studentship. So here you see it at the bottom right of my screen, a big snapshot of several of our current students. So this snapshot is coming from a blog post which was specifically dedicated to the junior researchers at ISO. They're coming from around the world, coming to ISO for a couple of years to do their research, and we've been asking them to share their experiences to promote the diversity and mainly to promote the interest in diverse populations to come and study astronomy, and of course ideally with us, but we're aware that we do not have enough spaces for all the interest of students that is available there. So we're hoping with these campaigns to also increase the general interest in STEM study. A few key considerations that I'd like to address. So this is mainly because so one main issue that we are facing is still that to increase the diversity in the request pools. So we still have severe underrepresentation of minorities, and at the moment, what we do, for example, is whenever some of our program scientists is giving a general talk about ISO, we ask them to put a slide about how to contact ISO Department of Communication to pitch a story to us. And with the goal, with the hope that this would bring in people which are traditionally not so used with public communication to come up and talk to us. Visibility comes with a risk, so this is very important to be aware of. So, for example, when we run a social media campaign and women and any other underrepresented groups in science are very easy targets. So this is very important. Our social media team is monitoring the situation provide support to the interviewed people. We train them in advance to explain them how they should engage or what kind of content on social media they should not engage whatsoever, doesn't matter how offended they feel and so on. We try to stop any explosions. It is very important to talk about diversity and inclusion, and we have introduced a couple of years back whenever there is a workshop reports published in the Messenger, for example, they need to talk about the demographics of the attendees and to give some basic ideas to allow us to monitor on long term. Obviously, we need to monitor the outcome, which is not easy in the case, as I've explained, because of the lack of aggregated demographics data of our request, but we can do only for the products that go out. And last but not least, education. So this is really important to educate our communities of both science communications and scientists how to make sure that their products are diversity aware. Here at ISO, we have specifically a science communication internship program, which runs throughout the year. I encourage all amongst you which are interested in this opportunity to have a look at our website. We accept applications throughout the year. So the internship is 6 months long, and per year we can host up to 4 interns. And the other thing we are at the moment doing is we're developing a science communication workshop for ISO scientists. We'll start first with the students and fellows, and then later on broaden once we see that the process is working on, which is in general about science communication, of course, but it will have explicit content on diversity and inclusion. And this brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take your questions as well.
Thank you very much, Maria. I think this was also very insightful and links again to some of the things other speakers have said. We have 15 minutes and a little bit more to have some questions. I'm not going to make this a very official panel session. Like, you can all stay in your seats and just answer the questions from where you are. Unfortunately, we have lost our Australian colleagues, but we'll make sure that they get the questions also, so that if they have anything to add, they can still add that to the Slack channel. I've been looking at the questions that came in through the Slack channel, and they seem to revolve around 2 topics, which I would summarize as one, how to tailor your events to your target audience, and the other one would be how to speak the language of your. Am I not? I'm sorry, I didn't check that. I hear myself really clearly behind me, so I'm trying not to be too voluminous. Do I need to repeat any of that? No? Okay. So on the one hand, how to tailor your events, and on the other hand, how to speak the language of your target audience. And then I don't mean only the actual language like English, Spanish, German, but also making your content accessible for people who need screen readers, who maybe they are colorblind and they need other color combinations on your website, etc. So I'd like to first make a summary question about the events. One of the questions that came in was if you have events targeted at a specific target group, like if you invite a specific group of people to your event, do you get a better turnout from that group as compared to an event that is open to everyone, even if it's large enough to accommodate everyone who's interested? I was thinking maybe Marcos and then maybe Ines could say something, and then I can look at the speakers online if you raise your hand if you want to answer that question. So Marcos, please.
Yes, I agree with you. Can you hear me? Yeah, I agree with you. If you do an activity for a specific public, the people that go to that specific appreciate the effort you are doing and the attention that you are giving to them, and the experience are plentiful, and I think that the turnoff is better. About I think that there's also questions about how we prepare for this activity. I think that the best way is to ask them, the people in the associations involved with the target public that you're going to receive into the activity, and ask them and learn from them. I think it's the best strategy that I can tell.
Thank you. Ines, did you have anything to add to that?
Not much, to be honest, because I don't do much event organization. I would assume from my public engagement colleagues' experience that they're really going to speak to those schools and saying, oh, it's for you, and trying to find a means for them to attend definitely helps, rather than expecting these schools to come over by themselves and then take that initiative. But it is mainly an assumption, I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. Maria or Anna, do you want to say? I think Maria, you look like you would like to add something to this. Go ahead.
Sure, I can. Something very brief from our experience. For example, in Chile, in 2019, we ran a specific event for the total solar eclipse, which was passing over one of our observatories, and there we worked especially with local communities to bring to enable that local school children can come and attend the eclipse from the observatory, which is a very important experience for them. And so nowadays, for here in Europe, actually, you have Tanya Johnston, the head of the ISO Supernova there, of ISO there with you, so she will be better able to give more examples for events here in Garching. But to give the perspective of the Chilean side there, we do a lot of work with local communities to bring to enable them to come to the observatories and to foster the engagement of the school children to the point that they are interested to pursue further on STEM engineering careers. And we provide their own additional support for in terms of scholarships and for study at university. So it's a full process that we are trying to start from starting the interest of a specific target group to bring it to a formal education stage.
Thank you. I think that's an important point to make, that it's a process. Yeah, Terry, I can take your question from the room.
Yeah, I don't want to sound negative because it's not intended to be, but something that strikes me is, I mean, as the Australian colleagues pointed out at the beginning, we can try and reflect our organisations as we wish them to be, but they aren't yet, right? So there's a risk there that we overplay some aspects, because in the end, when we get younger people involved, we might portray an issue that here is an inclusive, diverse workforce, but actually when they come and see us, they don't see that reflected on the ground. And an aspect of that which it doesn't bother me, I just sometimes wonder about it, is how convinced are we collectively that in fact our bosses, the senior scientists who run these institutions, are actually really behind this agenda as well? Or is it just being driven by us? So I'm not, I mean, we have a female DG who is really very actively out there pushing the EDI agenda, and she really believes in it. But, you know, there's a lot of older research scientists who agree it's important, but, you know, when push comes to shove, they don't necessarily take that extra step and put the extra effort in themselves. So it's a general question for the panelists. I mean, how convinced are you that your senior management is behind this, and what did you do to make sure that was the case?
Thank you, Terry. Well, anyone from the online wants to? Maria, go ahead.
Thanks a lot for this question. I could not hear your name, unfortunately, so I cannot address you personally, but this is really important what you're raising. And so this is why I'm also giving the talk that I gave today, and I do it to various conferences which talk on the topic of the DNI. The example at ISO that we tried is really with formalizing the guideline. So what we have is a guideline which is signed on by the DG, and it's distributed within the organization, and it's a request that the organization would use it. This one is specifically for communications products. You know, this is one start. We're working at the moment, as a member of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, we're working at the moment also on similar guidelines for hiring procedures, for example. And the communications one that we use, the communication ones was the fastest to go through, perhaps because there was push behind. So I was invited to attend the working group. I said yes, I've worked on it, and it happened. So, but yes, it a lot matters how much not only the DG would support it. In our case, we're very happy that our DG is very proactive himself on the topic of diversity, inclusion, and equity. We're hiring now a specific position on that. We have just advertised sustainability and diversity officer, because for us sustainability is taken in all its roles, not only environmental but also social and economic sustainability. Diversity is a main part of this approach. And but it's also not only the director, but the director's team as well, how supportive they are of it. And one way that I can say from the experience at ISO is that through such guidelines or policies recognized at the highest level of the organization is one way that you can basically close them out of colleagues which are not so convinced.
I would like to add something, and I totally agree, and I find the question very appropriate, and this is something that we should take into account. No, we don't need to sell more than we can, and we have to be also very honest. When we have done this project at the schools, some of them ask us, how many people working in this department, for example, computer engineering? And we have to admit that here we have a problem. We only have 3 women working in computing in a division of 60 people. And I think it's important for them to show that there is not equity in this field and that they can contribute to that. So apart from having the commitment of the DG, which is absolutely necessary, you need to show also that this is something in process, and that you need to keep work on that. This is not done at all.
Thank you, Anna. Actually, there was a question in the chat also linking to that if we keep talking about this leaky pipeline, are we not putting people, women, girls off? Are we not discouraging them by talking about the problems we have to get them into science? I saw a question. Was it Ines? Did you raise your hand?
Yes, but not to ask a question, but to answer, if that's okay. So regarding the second part of the question, so at Roslin, we have a career development committee, and all of heads of research divisions are part of the committee. So this really has to come from the top. I said we might have brilliant ideas, but we don't have the power to implement them. And then you say, okay, that's really great, but then you will have some group leaders not complying to the policies we establish. And yes, that happens. And speaking around, I know that some groups, for instance, we have core hours from 10 to 4, so to allow everyone to attend, because people might have commitments such as dropping their kids at school before that. And I know that there have been some group leaders not complying. So, and I think that's where us as comms professionals come in and can use our internal communications channels to remind staff, you know, these are the policies, and if you know that this is still not working, speaking then with the heads of divisions. And then regarding your first question is, so we did some unconscious bias training, so it's mandatory to all staff. And when I did it, I remember they presented some research on unconscious bias, And one of the pieces mentioned that, so for instance, on an interview panel, so if you're being interviewed for a job, if there is someone on the panel that you can relate to, so for instance, if you're a woman and there's a panel of men, but there is at least one, it's enough that there is at least one woman on the panel that you're more likely to perform better. And I'm an optimistic, so I do think that just giving examples, showing that there are role models, and they might be a minority for now, but I think starting with children, I think we were going to change that slowly. And we see that now how it's changing in politics, slowly. And to answer that question, so when we speak, it's not that we are speaking about the problem of gender imbalance, for instance. No, we are showing that women can be scientists, women can be professors. That's it. So we're not really discussing the problem at large. We're just organizing events where you can see, and I think maybe it was the speaker from Australia who mentioned, you know, we need to make it not weird that there is a panel just of women in conferences, for instance. So having those situations, you don't need to discuss that gender imbalance is an issue. You just need to show that people can be one of them. One of my colleagues told me, or not told me, once at an event, that you can only be what you can see. So just seeing those role models is so important.
Thanks, Ines. Yeah, Matthew, I saw your question.
Yeah, I wanted to answer Terry on that actually and provide an additional comment because it's a great question. As you point out, often these efforts are led by the communications teams, and communications teams are always empowered to make the changes necessary to help EDI in the organizations. But one great way to get your senior stakeholders to sit up and notice is when funding agencies start asking for it. When the European Commission starts requiring a gender equality plan for all projects that are funded by the EC, or when your council members start speaking up and asking for more information about your EDI efforts, and then all of a sudden things are possible. So that's really relevant, and that's definitely something I encourage communications colleagues to point out, to remind our senior stakeholders that we're not operating in a vacuum and that it's not just a communications thing, it's actually becoming a requirement that's linked to funding decisions.
Yeah, I think the drive towards putting DEI in compliance rules is definitely growing, at least what I can see from a European level. We have a few more minutes. I'd like to bring, oh, I see a lot of questions. Okay, so I'm not going to put the next, yeah, you in the front there.
I just heard a bit more about the leaky pipeline. I was wondering specifically what sort of age range or group do you think is important to target? And more specifically about how would you adapt the language so that they are engaged in how you're trying to target them?
Who wants to take that question from Marcos?
Yeah, well, I'm quite worried about that for the translations and for the language. For the moment, we work with people from different countries and we rely on them, and for adapt the message to different social angles, cultural angles, or disabilities. Or we also try to work with associations that help us to adapt the language, or to easy language, or to color subtitles. In fact, we are lucky in the IAA. We are lucky because Enrique Perez Montero, the PI of the project about the visits to Calar Alto Observatory, is very involved in these things, and in the project of from SKA to the world. people from different countries that can help us with these things. So this is the way we try to manage that difficulties. Okay? I don't know if I answered your question for.
Thanks, Marcos. There was a question on the second row there.
Hi there. I last year watched Picture a Scientist, the documentary, and following that, I was attended a panel discussion with some of the women who were featured in that wonderful film, and they started talking about leaky pipeline as a term, and they really didn't like it. They felt that you know, a pipe can still work if it's a bit leaky, and so I just wondered if, you know, anybody had any thoughts on what's maybe a better way of putting it, and yeah, and if anybody else agrees with that.
If I can, I actually definitely, from my personal experience, agree with that. And I actually sometimes think that we might take the analogy of a pinball machine. Like the ball's been put in, but you don't know where it's going to bounce off and when if it's going to go like in the winning part, or if it's just going to bounce out of the whole game. But yeah, I definitely also personally do not like the leaky pipeline analogy. I see Maria has her hand up, and I saw that Terry hasn't had another question, but Maria, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to answer this point that just raised about leaky pipeline. So I'm also a researcher myself, a part of Science Communicators, so I have a shared position. And one major thing I think we have to really acknowledge is that we're not talking about a leaky pipeline or something that is broken that we need to fix. We're talking about a system that is built this way. We're talking about a system that enables research that is meant that is built in a way that it does not encourage diversity per se. So I don't want to open here the big discussion. Why is that, and so on. It's not the purpose of this seminar that we are gathered, but it's. I fear often that when we talk about fixing the leaky pipeline, we're fixing a problem that is actually elsewhere. It's a problem, it's a very serious systemic problem that the system is built in such a way that there will be a leaky pipeline, as we are calling it. So I'd like ideally to stop using this analogy with the leaky pipeline myself as well, and really go to the roots of the problems. Of course, we're not the communicators here in this room, we're not going to be the ones fixing it, but we can make a lot of noise about it. And as also Matthew pointed out about the importance of science policies, requesting ADA plans, and this is something that I'm hopeful that organizations, major international organizations, can also join the force there to change that.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. I think as communicators, we definitely have some power to change the jargon that we're using about these topics. We have space for like one really short question, and I saw Terry already. Go ahead.
Yeah, in response to that other question, I would really strongly encourage everybody to have a look at the Aspires report done by King's College, both 1 and 2, which was specifically into why young people stop studying science, not just women. And the answer is, unsurprisingly, they don't see it as relevant to their future career options. But if you can make it relevant to their future career options, they are 14 times more likely to continue studying science subjects than they would otherwise. I mean, we know this is not just science and take up of STEM, it's participation in sport, it's participation in a whole series of social activities. There is a critical age between 12 and 14, particularly for young girls or for women, where society is telling them they have to be something else. And so I entirely agree. I think it is our responsibility to do more on this field, but there's research out there where when you do run into people who question some of the methods or the intent, and going back to my earlier point about how do you get buy-in, there's research out there that we can use and say, we do it like this because this works, and we know it works. And I had a situation at Jodrell Bank with one of the STFC public engagement exhibits here a couple of years ago, And we were talking about exactly that subject with a group of people, using them as a bit of a test bed to trial some of the concepts we're thinking of. And I said was talking about the fact that engaging more young women in science, and a woman stood up and said, well, what happens if she just wants to be a hairdresser? Well, I'm sorry, what's wrong with being a hairdresser? I didn't really know what to say about that. And for those of you who know me, that was unusual. But I repeated that to somebody, another group later in the day, and this woman said, I am a hairdresser. There's an enormous amount of chemistry in hairdressing. If I had known that when I was at school, I would be a better hairdresser. Pretty good example, right? So we can do that on a daily basis, but I would encourage you, if you haven't seen it, to look at the Aspires report. It's great.
Yeah, so would you mind putting a link or some pointer to that report in the Slack? I mean, I have presented some other research in this field at the Euroscience Open Forum, which I'll also put in the Slack, so that we exchange on these things, because not all of us are aware of everything at the same time. I think with that, I need to wrap up, yes. So I'd like to thank our online speakers, Maria and Anna. Lovely to have you had here in the session. Interesting presentation, and thanks for the panel discussion. And also the speakers who are here. So Ines, Marcos, thanks a lot for your contributions, and everyone else, thank you for your questions and your attention. And then I'll give the floor back to our main organizer and big hero of Paris, Mathieu.